Okay, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. First of all, Jazakallah for coming and taking out your time. Inshallah, we won't take too long because what I'm hoping to do is do a presentation and then we can have a discussion or you can look around. And thereafter, if more parents come, we'll probably do another presentation. So it won't be too long, inshallah. Okay? Okay, first of all, before we begin to talk about Fatimah Elizabeth Cates Academy, just a very quick brief into what Muslims believe about education. And for Muslims, it all begins on the very first page, or the very first revelation to Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which was Iqra, Bismi Rabbika alladhi khalaq. The very first word revealed to Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was Iqra, read. So, as an ummah, we've been given education as a priority over many other things. Okay? And to understand what Islam says about education and educating ourselves, we don't need to look so far. We look at the Battle of Badr. Following the Battle of Badr, there were many prisoners of war. Now, Prophet ﷺ, if he wanted, according to the custom of the time and the tribal custom, they would usually kill all the prisoners. They wouldn't really have many prisoners of war. But in this case, Prophet ﷺ, he said to, at that time, the disbelievers, that if you can teach 10 Muslims to read and write, you are free. So at that point, we can understand the revolution that Prophet ﷺ is bringing. So, first of all, where do we fit into this? And, going back to our vision, our pedagogy and methodology. So, I'll just read through this. Our pedagogy and teaching methodology will be formulated around four basic things. And we're building upon this as we go along. So, we want it to be an experience-based education, which caters for the individual needs of pupils and thrives on their unique learning skills. So if there's a child who's very good at something, okay, we will want him to thrive in that. Okay, and we will try and plan our lessons in order to, for him to thrive using that skill within Islamic studies or tajweed or anything else. Number two, we want it to be a holistic method which encourages active, independent learning. And the teacher takes the place of a facilitator, which in Arabic we call the hadi. There's two types of hadis. Hadi means the guide. Now, according to Islamic philosophy, there's two types of guides. One is a guide who holds your finger and takes you to the destination. And then you have the other type of guide, which is called ira'atul tariq, who doesn't hold you by the finger and take you to the destination, who shows you the way, okay? Who gives you directions. By hadi here we mean we're going to not always show everything to the kids so they become dependent upon us, but show them the way so they become independent. So even when we're not there, which we're basically teaching them to learn without us. And even when it comes to al-Qaeda and the tajweed and the Quran and everything else, it revolves around that. So we're pretty different in that sense. Number three, one which works towards keeping the hearts and minds of Muslim children open for Islam and the maktab after they leave the maktab. And this for us is one of the most important things. We want children to come to our madrasa or maktab or institute, whatever you want to call it. And we want their hearts not only to be open towards Islam once they leave, but to have, to have love for Islam. And the reason why I mentioned this, I remember when I was studying at an Islamic institute, a seminary in Yorkshire, I went with one of my books. It was Sahih al-Bukhari, and it was all the 6 major books in one. And as I sat at the back of this taxi in Leeds, this person, the taxi driver, got out. Okay? And because I had a beard and I was dressed like this and I had a big box, and this person was a Muslim. And he got scared. And I asked him, why are you scared? What's happened? And then he told me about an incident that he had in one of his madrasas or mosques, okay, where the teacher used to be physically violent against him. Okay? So things like that have happened. So, and a lot of times it's not just physical, even the way, a lot of times within the madrasas, teachers are not qualified, they're not taught how to teach in that sense. So there are things that take place which close the minds and hearts of children, and that's something that we are completely opposed to and something that we want to really focus on. And lastly, the curriculum should be made relevant to the students of the modern age. Okay. I will show you that as we go along, inshallah. Okay, so next one. Okay, so what we've done is we've looked back at our scholars from traditional Islam, and we're also looking at modern techniques of teaching, and we're trying to intermingle both and use both. So we looked at Imam Ghazali, rahimahullah, and he said, have fun with your child for 7 years, perform ta'deeb on him for 7 years, or her. Prevention of the child from playing games and constant insistence on learning deadens his or her heart, blunts his or her sharpness of wit, and burdens his or her life. He looks for a ruse to escape them, his studies altogether. So here, what we understand is that children at a certain age should be taught through play and games. And this is something that we try and focus on quite a bit. How can we use games to teach our children certain things? So for example, Qaeda, even Islamic studies. So this is something that we focus on, and we take this from our traditional scholars and scholarship. Okay, and Imam Ghazali, like I said, he mentioned that games, presumably through games, that's some educational purpose or as a form of reward for studying. So using games, not just for the mere purpose of playing them, but using them as a tool for them to have fun at the same time, basically fooling them into learning. And that's our pedagogy. That's what we try and do, especially with the little kids, the little children who come, the young children. Okay, here is a scholar, Abu Hassan al-Amiri. He's from the Mamluk period, and also following this there'll be another Mamluk scholar. One of my lecturers once told me that if you want to look at a pure classical empire, look at the Mamluk empire. And they were really advanced in a lot of things that they did. A lot of things that they created, made, a lot of their skills actually went to Italy during the Renaissance, and a lot of it was taken as well. So one of the scholars mentions, children must be playfully coaxed into acquiring knowledge and understanding. So the point of all this is that using play as a means of teaching comes from Islam and from scholars who lived hundreds of years ago, 1,000 years ago. Yeah. And lastly, Al-Abdari, again a Mamluk scholar, he's mentioning that if you keep on telling a child, and this is one of the things why we are open on weekends, on Saturdays and Sundays, because there is actually a hadith of Prophet there's a khabar or a athar. Athar means a story or an incident from a companion of the Prophet ﷺ. And there was a companion, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu. He used to lecture every Thursdays, and this is in Sahih al-Bukhari. He used to lecture on Thursdays, and the tabi'een used to come to him and say to him, look, why don't you lecture us every day? We take so much from your lectures. And then he said to them, look, we have learned from Prophet ﷺ that we shouldn't overburden those who we are teaching. We should not overburden our students. Therefore, I don't want to overburden you, and therefore we're going to have our lectures on Thursdays. So one of the reasons why we have it once a week, but we try and ensure that the lesson is so relevant, so fun, and so engaging that the students will remember it throughout the week. That's the idea of it. Yes. Okay. So just to give you a bit of background on how our classrooms are based. So if you walk into some of our classrooms, there will be lots of noise and children walking around, moving about. So that's there on purpose. We don't believe in a silent classroom where everyone's quiet and they're just writing away. Okay, that is one way of learning. However, we look back at the Islamic universities, and if you look at, here's one classroom. In this classroom, people are doing different things. There's someone reading, someone writing, someone researching, someone reading a book. Okay, there's research going on here. This is the kind of classroom that we want to create, where there's different things going on. And what that does is, students, they don't get bored. Okay, they always have something to engage with. Okay. And we're going back to classical Islamic period. Yeah, sure. Okay, again, another portrait from the Ottoman times. So if you look closely, there's different things going on at different times. Okay. And I'm going to lead this back to the whole idea of independent learning. So usually in madrasa, what you have a teacher. And this is what we don't have, basically. We don't go for this kind of model. You have a teacher, and there's students all around him or her. And usually it's a lecture. So you can see the arrows. The teacher's talking, everyone's just receiving everything. They're just receiving it. Some might be asleep, not very well engaged, but they're all receiving. Okay, so what happens in schools? Okay, you have schools do differ quite a bit. Okay, but usually you do have the teacher at the front, and there's a lot of to and fro. So there are a lot of questions being asked, students are responding. There's a lot of paired work, group work as well. However, what we are trying to do here, for those of you who have seen our classroom, it works like this. If they were all the same age, you wouldn't be able to tell who's a teacher, who's a student. And that's the idea of this. Okay? So if you go into our classrooms, you'll find a teacher somewhere on one of the tables. Usually we have 2 or 3 teachers in one classroom, just to keep the quality and just so that everyone knows what they're doing, especially for the younger children. So we tend to have more teachers with them. But over here, you can't really tell who the teacher is. Okay? And this is what we talk, when we say independent learning, this is what we talk about. Even from the beginning, we try and teach them the importance of becoming independent learners. And that's not just for schools, but for Islamic studies even more. Okay? Because the idea that I kind of get from a lot of students that I meet outside, and one of the reasons why I decided to start Fatimah Elizabeth Gates is when I was becoming a teacher, we had to observe different lessons in primary schools and secondary schools. And I asked so many students in primary schools and secondary schools, what they like more, madrasa or school. And I failed to find even one child who said that I prefer madrasa over school. Okay? And that's why one of the main reasons why I wanted to start Fatimah Elizabeth, make it different. Okay? So that students are well engaged, they're well informed, and they enjoy what they're doing. And they become independent learners, so that when they finish the madrasa, they know exactly where they're doing what, and the things they want to do. So a lot of times I get a lot of phone calls from people who ask me, look, are you having adult courses? Are you doing this? Are you doing that? A lot of people, they've been to madrasa. Okay? They've studied the Quran. And I'm talking about a lot of students. They've studied the Quran for 5-6 years, but they still want to do beginner's tajweed course. And the question is why? And there's a problem. Okay? The problem is that we're not addressing this within the madrasa. Tajweed should be taught in madrasa. There was a madrasa I began teaching, this is about, I think, 7-8 years ago. And I mentioned to the head teacher, that, look, why don't we teach tajweed from the alif, ba, ta, tha? And he said, no, let them finish the qaida first, then we'll teach them tajweed. Okay, and that just doesn't make sense. Right? It's like saying, well, let him just sit in the car, and then later on at some point he'll learn the practical and theory himself. Okay? It's just not going to work. And that's why we take tajweed seriously as well, which I'm going to talk about in a little while, inshallah. Okay. Now, not just independent learning, there's another thing that we focus on quite a bit. Okay? A lot of times what I see in madrasas and even in schools is this whole authority. Okay? That teachers up there and students all the way down here. And it's always teachers looking down upon students. And it's not like that everywhere. Okay? But there's this whole hierarchy and authority there. When we look at the life of Prophet ﷺ, he was obviously the authority, but he lived amongst his companions. Okay? He ate with them. He spoke to them. They were very open with him. So what we look at is, our concept of education. So going to a book called Pedagogy of the Oppressed. So I want to read through this once and explain this and tell you where we're coming from. And then I'll show you the basic stuff of our madrasa. So there is no such thing as a neutral educational process. Okay? There's no such thing as neutral education. Education either functions as an instrument that is used to facilitate the integration of the younger generation into the logic of the present system. I'll explain that. Yeah. So what they're saying is there's 2 types of education. One is the type of education which all it does is it makes children conform to their society. So whatever the society tells them, they will just listen. They won't question. They won't be critical of it. Okay? So all it's telling them to do is listen, listen, and listen. If you go into a school from the very first bell till the end, it's all about, no, you've got to listen to us. You've got to understand what we're saying, what we're telling you. And that's conformity. And then the other type of education is that, no, the education of freedom. Being able to, alongside the teacher, look at the world around you, okay, and try to critically and creatively, not just critically. Okay, there's a lot of students out there who just are against the system for no reason. No, but the purpose is to creatively, critically, and Islamically delve into the world to transform the world. And this is the whole crux of our pedagogy in the classroom. So when our teachers are planning, this is what they have in the back of their minds. How can, through this lesson, our students be able to engage with the world or the reality around them in order to transform it for the better? And when we look at the companions, this is what they did. I mean, when a companion went to Persia, he was asked, why have you come here? And the general Yazdagar said to him, why have you come? If you come for gold, silver, money, wealth, we'll give it to you, but go away. And he said, no, إِنَّ اللَّهَ إِبْتَعَثَنَا لِنُخْرِجَ الْعِبَادِ مِنْ عِبَادَةِ الْعِبَادِ إِلَىٰ عِبَادَةِ رَبِّ الْعِبَادِ. That no, Allah has sent us to take out the people from the slavery of the people towards the slavery of the Lord of the people. And this is what it's about. So it's about teaching our children to look at the world creatively, critically, and Islamically. So when they do go to school, when they do go anywhere, they don't just take everything that they hear in, even from Islamic scholars. They're able to question, they're able to ask why, and be confident about this. A lot of madrasas or students I meet, they're not really confident with this, okay? And they have a problem with this. So the aim is that they're able to question. And the way we do that, we'll show you some different ways of doing it. Okay. Next. Okay, so if you go back. Okay, so this is basically one of the scenes from our classroom. This is what happens. We sometimes have students doing a certain thing on one table, students of a different level doing work on another table, and then they're all doing something related to the same topic, but they're doing what they enjoy most. So, for example, they're doing something on the qaida. They're learning tajweed. So this child, he can't really sit down, for example, and read all the time. So what we get him to do is to trace over letters, to write over letters. Okay? And then he rubs them out and does it again. So there's different ways of doing things. Yeah. Just going back to the independent thing. Some of the ways that we teach qaida, okay, when we want them to learn how to recognize letters, is not just to look at the page and memorize it, it's to be able to feel it and be able to shape it as well, and then understand how the shape looks like, for instance. Yeah, carry on. There's some pictures just to give you an idea. Again, over here, what they're doing is they're not just sitting down learning from the qaida itself, because usually when you go to a madrasa, it's usually the qaida there, and they're just moving back and forth. So here, what they're doing is they are using the qaidas, but as a tool to understand different letters, how they come in the beginning, middle, or end of a word or a sentence. And if you look, they're well engaged. They don't have a teacher. A teacher might be walking around, just facilitating them here and there, but that's independent learning. Okay? Okay, so just a quick idea of what we do. When we talk about independent learning, for instance, we have projects. So last year, we did a project, not last year, beginning of this year, we did a project on Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And what we got the secondary school students to do was to develop their own websites. So when we say independent learning, we didn't teach them, like give them 2 whole lessons on how to develop a website. All it was a group on a table, and we showed them, gave them just one A4 sheet, gave them steps, where to go on the websites, what to do, told them how to do it. And they got on with it, and they had about 4 weeks to do it. And then about 7-8 students, they came along, they did their website. So we're teaching them seerah, for instance, and they were told what kind of things to include. So they were told to include the life of Mecca, Prophet ﷺ's life in Mecca, his life in Medina, etc. And about 7-8 students went along, and they did it, and they presented it as well. So these are some of the things that we do under independent learning. Yeah, okay. Now going to the whole idea of questioning and engaging critically. Okay? So what we use things like the question matrix. So what we get our students to do, we put a picture over here, okay? A thought-provoking picture, and we ask them to combine a word from this side on the left and a word from the right side and make a sentence and come up with a question. Okay? So let's give you some examples. So here is a quick example about shirk. Okay? So we don't just teach them about shirk, literally what it is. but also metaphorically what it can mean as well. I mean, when the Quran speaks about ourselves, أَفَرَأَيْتَ مَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهَهُ هَوَاهُ, have you not seen that person who has made himself his Lord? Have you not seen that man or that person who has made his own desires his Lord? So going back to that, I mean, what we do is put the picture up and ask them to come up with questions. Just say we say to them, look, come up with 5 questions. The further away you go from the question matrix, the more deeper your level of thinking gets. So that's one example. There's one to really show you. The next one. Yes. So what we did once, we were looking at the Prophet's last sermon, and we were linking it on to his death and what happened after. So we looked at this spot over here. We gave them a bit of information about this. This is where the Prophet gave his final sermon. They did an activity called the Diamond 9, where they broke up the Prophet's sermon into 9 bits and spoke about what they thought was the most important. So if you can see the contrast, usually a lot of places they will just have a person just lecturing, talking about it, giving his own opinions, his own interpretation. But here, students, they are engaging, they are talking with each other, gaining confidence about this, and then they're presenting it as well. It's a huge difference between the two. So what we did after that, we asked them to look at this picture, think about how it must have been when the Prophet gave his last sermon, and ask them to come up with 5 questions. Okay? So for example, one of the students said, how might the Prophet have felt during his last sermon? So he's using words right from the end. How might he have felt? Then we had a discussion on that. Someone said, okay, sad. Why? Happy? Why? Okay. Why do you think he felt like that? Okay. So it's more of a deeper level engagement with the topic, as opposed to just listening to a lecture and trying to take it all in and trying to understand it. So these are some of the ways that we do it. And then what we did was we got them to write a diary entry, imagining as if they were there, okay, and how it must have been, and they gave a whole description. So for them to then understand this, not just to remember it, but to understand it, and then how they can apply certain things becomes easier for them, as opposed to if they just listen to lectures. Okay? Some more. I just want to give you a few more examples, just to give you a bit of a taste of what kind of things happen during our lesson. So again, we've seen this portrait many times, but what we do is we get them to ask, like I said, about 5 questions, and usually this is at the beginning of the lesson. Okay? So if we're teaching a topic on the Prophet, we look at which story it is or what we're talking about, we'll get a picture, something related to it, make them ask 5 questions, then we ask them to walk around the classroom and ask people to give answers for those 5 questions. And in those questions which they do not get the answers for, they begin to ask the teachers. Okay? So this is where we start from. Then we try and make them think deeper on how they can relate to what's happening. So we've got, same picture, ice cream van at the back. Okay? And what we're trying to say is, look, we live in a global world. How should we be thinking about not just fellow Muslims, but fellow humans, anyone around the world? And especially, and when I spoke about our education being relevant, we're going back to what's happening today. So the refugee crisis. Yeah? And it's been there for quite some time, but now it's coming up more on the media. So how can they play a part in that? And what they could do. So for example, this we used for a lesson on zakat. So we started right from here and spoke about, look, this is what happens. This is the world that we live in. How do we play a part in this world? So then so a few more pictures to get them into it, and then we went on to the topic of zakat, talking about why we need to give zakat and sadaqah. And then we also at one point went on to fair trade, how they can help just through fair trade as well. Okay. Another example is one of these. Can anyone guess what this is? Looks like a ruler. Anyone seen this before? Okay. If you put it up. So there is actually a hadith of Prophet ﷺ. He drew this box. He described this outer line to be life. Okay? And this line going across here as a person living their life, and these lines crossing that line as different struggles and hardships that person faces. And he drew this in the sand, by the way. And the line that comes outside the box are all the desires of a person and all their wants and what they wanted, but they died before that. So the last line being death. Okay. So what we tend to do, the things that we do is we'll give this picture there, and we'll ask them to firstly figure out what they think that means, whatever it means. it'll get them to open up and start thinking. Or we can reverse that and so just go back. So what we'll do is give the hadith which describes that box and all those lines, and say to them, look, try and draw that box that Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, drew. Draw that box. And I've done this with quite a few schools. I was teaching in Richmond a few years ago, and even though a lot of them were not Muslim, but they had quite a lot of fun doing this and then understanding where all this came from. Okay, and then understanding the box and understanding struggle in itself. Yep. So that's the other way. And then you show them. Even this picture is a muhaddith's interpretation of this hadith. So we're not sure if the Prophet actually drew the box exactly like this or if it was different or not. Okay, coming back to questioning and making our students question, and I'll try and wrap up us after this as well, inshallah. Okay, so if you look here, this is like something I scanned from one of the students' books. So these are the kind of things that we do. So they'll get these pieces cut out, and they were looking at Salah, I believe. So they'll have a brainstorm, and then they got these 9 diamonds. And what they were supposed to do with the 9 diamonds was at the top write down what they thought was the most important aspect of Salah, and at the bottom which was not as important. Okay? And then the rest go in order. So what happened was this student put up what they thought was the most important, least important. And when the teacher comes to mark, the teacher marks in green. They ask him, okay, give me the reason for why that's most important. So they try and challenge their thinking a bit more. And then the student responds in red. And sometimes the teacher looks back to see what they responded. They might ask another question about it. Okay? It's a follow-up. So when we're marking, we're trying to make sure that our marking is not just tick and flick into the next page, but actually what they're doing, we try and challenge them even more to find out how they feel. And that's not just on the paper. Usually when we're working on the tables, we're asking them questions. We ask them very difficult questions. So for example, why do you need to follow a prophet in the 21st century? Okay? Prophets lived 1,400 years ago. Why do you need to follow a prophet? Technology is advanced, everything's advanced, we've got so much. Why do we need a prophet? And then we give them like a few minutes to discuss. They come back to us, we try and break down their arguments. Just so that when they are outside and they ask questions, they don't feel scared. They're confident to respond and they know what they're talking about. Just another example. And what you can do at the end is there are some books at the back, you can look at them as well. Okay, should we move on? Okay, just to give you a brief of what our day consists of. So it's up to here basically. So there's 3 sessions. Okay, the first session is either going to be memorization or tajweed. When we say memorization, that would include everything that they need to memorize. Okay, so we won't make them memorize during Islamic studies. Islamic studies will be there just to understand, to reflect, to think about. Memorization is where they'll memorize different du'as. And when we say memorizing, we don't say just the Arabic. They'll have to memorize the Arabic, and then the English, the translation of it, and also the excellence, okay, or the virtues of that dua. Okay, so that's all 3 things. And you'll be able to check their progress in their diaries, because there's a page at the back of their diaries where you'll be able to see a stamp on every single section. And then they'll move on. And so that's memorization. So it's not just du'as, also salah. Okay, we won't make them memorize we won't make them memorize salah things during Islamic studies. Islamic studies will be about pondering over salah, what it's about, why it's for. The memorization bit will be just those first 30 to 45 minutes. So, so salah, also how many rak'ahs in salah, etc. Then comes qaida and tajweed. So like I said, we do take tajweed quite seriously in that sense. I'll show you what we mean by tajweed and why we take it seriously and why we don't rush our students. In our madrasa, the aim is not to finish the Quran from the beginning till the end. That's not the aim. Okay, if they do that, that's good. But the aim is whatever amount they do it properly with tajweed and how it's supposed to be done, right from the very first page. Okay, right from the very first page. That's our aim. And Islamic studies is the stuff that I already spoke about already. Okay? So if you just go to the next bit, we'll look at tajweed. So, what tends to happen is, we have the qaida book, and we aim to finish the qaida in about a year and a half, 2 years at most. Okay? But that will be with proper tajweed. So they will, by the end of the qaida, they will know how to pronounce all the letters correctly. not just where they come from, but the actual pronunciation. Okay? Talks about a different rule of the Quran. Okay? Talks about a different rule of tajweed. And after every rule, there's about 2-3 pages of practices. And you can see some of these books at the back as well, and they get to highlight them and practice them. So just to show you a few rules, for instance, here's a quick thing about tajweed in general, okay? Just for our general information and knowledge, that it's very similar to a driving test. If you make one major, you fail, minors, they're accepted here and there. So similar with tajweed, there's a difference between major mistakes and minor mistakes. And what tends to happen is a lot of places they haven't learned, don't really teach it, and they end up learning the Quran wrong. And it's a waste of a lot of time. Okay? So we can just go through some of the kind of mistakes that could be made and how we need to be careful about them. Okay, let's do all of them. So for instance, there's 4 words. Zalla, dhalla, dhalla, and dhalla. Okay. They're pronounced very similarly. But through the slip of the tongue, the meaning changes. So for example, zalla means to slip, to make a mistake. Dhalla, to become low. Dhalla, to keep going. And dhalla, to go astray. So a lot of times in madrasas, they pronounce all of them as Z, as in they will pronounce that as zalla, that is zalla, that is zalla, and that is zalla as well, or dhalla. Okay. And all of them, the translation and the meaning will change. Okay. And they all account for major mistake. So if you were in a driving test, you would have failed. If you made a mistake in either one of them. Yeah. So what we tend to do, we show them the difference, okay, through images, through even through practical steps. Yeah, on that. So for instance, dhal, we show them where it's pronounced from. Yeah. So if you look at the tongue, again. Yeah. Yeah, so it's the tip of the tongue and tip of the teeth. And what we tend to do with the little kids as well, we have a Play-Doh tongue, which we put in here. We make them actually pronounce it on this as well, then try and pronounce it themselves. So right from the first few pages of the qaida, they're already engaging on how to pronounce correctly, for example. Okay, Karen. Okay, so now the question is, what is the difference between dhalla and dhalla when the place of pronunciation, or the makhraj as they call it, is the same? So if you notice, dhalla was the tip of the tongue and tip of the teeth. Dhalla is also tip of the tongue and tip of the teeth. So what's the difference? Then we explain to them the sifat of huruf, of letters. So the qualities of how they're supposed to be pronounced. So, for instance, what we do is on the first page of their book, what we have is on the qaida alif ba ta tha, we've got our own page where on every letter we've written down whether it's full mouth or empty mouth. So they are visualizing right from the start how to pronounce correctly and how to make sure they don't make a mistake. So there is empty mouth and Allah is full mouth. We've just exaggerated that for the students to understand. Okay, just one quick anecdote about tajweed and why it's important in that sense. I was once praying behind an imam who, instead of reading wattini was zaytun, read wattini was zaytun. You can't really tell the difference. Wattini, wattini. That slight difference, we had to do our prayer again because the meaning changed and it was a major mistake. Okay, so wattini, the actual word, it means by the figs and the olives. Wattini was zaytun means by the soil and by the olives. So because the meaning changed and it's right in the very first sentence, in the very first word, therefore we had to redo our salah again. So that's why it's important to understand tajweed right from the start. And that's why we focus more on tajweed as opposed to getting our students to finish the Quran. That's not the purpose. For us, the purpose is to get it right. I studied tajweed for about 5 years. And when I said 5 years, it means 7 days a week in a madrasa. We did about 2 hours of tajweed every single day. So we had like an hour and a half during the day and half an hour in the evening where we practiced. In 5 years, I think I just done 3 juz of the Quran, 3 chapters. First 3 chapters, that's it. Okay. So the purpose is, and this is where you do it professionally. So they don't even think about finishing the Quran. So in 5 years, I did just 3. That's 7 days a week, 2 hours every day. Okay. So the purpose is not to finish. The purpose is to get it right and proper. Okay, so what we do alongside the tajweed, once a student finishes tajweed and they're reading the Quran, so they'll just say if they bring 2-3 pages or 5 to 6 pages a week, alongside those few pages, what we also want them to do, and this is what we're working on right now as we speak, is to also give a summary in English of their sabaq, as we call it in Arabic and Urdu. Okay? So if they've done 4 pages in Arabic, they have to then also give a summary of each of the pages. This is the Quran that we use, which is a very simplified translation for children. And what it does is it also has like a background to the text. So usually when you open up a normal Quran translation, it's very difficult to understand what it's trying to say because there's no context. So this translation brings that context into it, yeah? Explains the context, explains what's happening, then gives a very simple, easy translation for children to understand. And then we also use traditional scholarship to further look at the interpretation of the Quran. So, but not just, once they finish the tajweed book I was talking about, they're not just going to be reading the Quran in Arabic. They're also going to be looking at the translation. So the difference is, we're not teaching them Arabic as a language. Okay? We're not teaching them Arabic as a language. If they want, we might have a course separately. But they're reading the Arabic, and separately they're analyzing the English text, looking at the context as well. Okay? So this is something that we're going to be doing, but that's once they finish their tajweed book, and then they're on the Quran from the beginning. So if some of your children are on the Quran already, we'll put them on the tajweed book, just to go over those 20 rules, practice them, and then we'll move them on to the Quran, so that when they're reading the Quran, it's with tajweed, and also they're understanding some of it as well. And the reason why we're doing this, I'll explain this right at the end, inshallah, and who we get inspired from. Yep. Okay, yeah, just a few things, practical things. What we're going to do at the beginning, you might have a few questions, so I'm going to try and answer as many questions as I can, which are developing in your mind at the moment. All the books, we will provide the books, and your children will be able to keep them as well. So that means they're workbooks, exercise books, textbooks, learn by heart books, diary, everything else, even the pens. Okay? Because the last thing we want them to do is take their pencil case out of their school bag, put it in our bag they bring to madrasa, and on Monday they forget to put it in their school bag. So what we do is, you don't need to bring any pens or anything like that. We provide all that here. And this they will be able to keep, but this will be part of the admin fee. Okay? So the £25 admin fee, that will include all the books and the administration costs and everything else. Okay, just going back to assessment. So Einstein said, everyone is a genius, but if you judge a fish on its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. So we don't really have exams. Okay? Looking at so many madrasas over time, I just didn't see the point of exams. Okay, in school it's a different case altogether. You have GCSEs and you've got to move on, etc. But we didn't see the point of exams, so we don't have exams at the end of the year. What we do have is assessments. And what we do is we have, I won't explain it all here, it's just going to be in the diaries once, if you decide, you want your children to join, it's going to be in there as well. So what we tend to do is every 3 months, without telling the students, without telling the teachers, they don't get stressed over it, they don't have to prepare. The idea is just to test, or just to see where they're at. And and when we listen to them, we don't just listen to one place. We first of all ask them to read Surah Fatiha, for instance. Focus on minute tajweed errors. And then we'll ask them from another place which they've already studied. And then we'll ask them from a third place which they've never looked at before in the Quran. Just to see, the third one will be to see how good they are in learning independently of the teacher. Okay? Because if they can read Surah Fatiha really well, read their sabaq really well, okay, they're good dependent learners, but what about independent learners? And if they're not so good learning independently, so one of the targets that they'll get is for the teachers to make them independent learners. And then the teachers got to think about how they're going to do this, and we work with the teachers to develop that as well. Okay, so we're nearly finished. Some of you are really tired, so almost finished now. Yeah, if you just go back a bit, pull up the inside. Okay, so our assessment is very simple. What we do is we have tajweed rules in front of us. If a student is lacking in something or he needs to work on it more, we'll highlight it red in his diary, and then we'll make them write out their targets for the next 2-3 months. Okay? And they will go about focusing on that tajweed rule. So students, they work really closely with tajweed with us as well. The only thing that parents will have to make sure is, if once they get their homework, is that if they can sit down every day or every other day, even just for 10 or 15 minutes, that's it. You don't need to sit down with them and explain to them. We'll give them the homework, we'll explain to them, and they just need to sit down and make their own effort. Because we're only on the weekends, so we can't be like other madrasas who give like 3-4 lines and 3-4 lines every day. What we do is we would give like 2 pages. Okay? And we'll tell them, look, do half page one day, half page the other day, and work. And that's all part of the independent learning. And initially, I thought it wasn't going to work. I was, 50-50. But now that I've seen it happen, I've seen students doing it, I'm quite happy with the progress. Okay, some of the books that we use. So we don't always use textbooks. 30% of our lessons, or 25-30%, are textbooks. We use Safar Academy's books because they are quite fun, engaging, colourful, and students like that. So these will come as part of the admin fee as well. Okay, so yeah, like I said before, if you can just kind of ensure that our students or your children sit down for 10-15 minutes, all we need to make sure is they have a permanent space. We did this with our children a few months ago. We looked at i'tikaf and how, what the meaning of i'tikaf was. To have that moment in silence to focus on your Quran or focus on your homework even from school, and just have that place where you can't take any electrical gadgets with you or anything like that. So this is where we ask them to do that. So a lot of students are doing things like that as well, and we try and emphasize this quite a bit. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So what parents need to do is in their diaries they'll have homework. Yeah. If they don't do the homework, we don't punish them. We do kind of ask them to try their best, but we don't really punish them. We don't have that system. Like I said, we don't have the system where the teachers up there, students down here, we try and work together. Yeah. And that's why we don't have detentions. And we've stopped this about 3 to 4 months ago, and it's working really well. So if there are some students who are talking quite a lot, we'll speak to them. We'll have a discussion with them, ask them, look, what's wrong, what's the problem? And speak to them on their level, with them. And we've seen that works much better. And the relationship between the teacher and student is really, really good. And the whole idea, which we tell our teachers as well constantly, is that you're not just teachers, you're learners at the same time, just as your students are learners. So they're both on the same level. But coming back to the diary, and we're finishing off here as well, you just got to make sure that if they could sit down, they have the time to learn the du'as. So that's meaning, Arabic, and the excellence. And secondly, the Islamic studies, if they get that, if they could do that as well. And lastly, the tajweed as well. Okay, that's just a few pages from the book, from the Bible. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, let's just stop there. So, like I said, one of the pages where you can just measure progress when it comes to memorization, this is a direct page from the diary itself. So, for example, the kalima. Okay. Once they learn the Arabic, they'll get a stamp by a teacher. So it won't be a sign, it'll be a proper stamp with the date. They learn the meaning, and usually all we want them to do is one dua a week. That's it. No more than that. Okay. Some of them do tend to do quite a lot. Right? But all we ask for is just one. If there's some big duas, we just say, look, just learn the Arabic 1 week, meaning the next. And then we ask them to revise every week. And then we try and ask them to remind them to use those duas as well. Yep. And only once they've done all 3 aspects of each dua or whatever they have to learn, only then they move to the next bit. Okay, yeah, just another thing, which I remembered from these 4 boxes. What we try to create within our classroom, because we're not affiliated to any mosque, so we're not a sectarian madrasa or an institute or an academy. So we're open to people from different groups, different backgrounds, and that's why even one of the pages of our diary, once they finish how to learn, how to pray according to whichever school they belong to, they can also look at the different ways other people pray. Okay? So how the Malikis pray, the Shafis, the Hanbalis, or the Hanafis, to understand diversity within Islam itself, and to celebrate that, as opposed to be afraid of it. Yeah. Okay, so it's not just lessons in the classroom that we do. Like I said, we have projects every few months. So we did a project on the Prophet. So we had like about 20 options for the students, going from primary all the way till secondary. And there were things like writing a book. There were things like making models of the fruits or the food that the Prophet ﷺ used to eat, making models of the house of the Prophet and then writing about it, making models of the Prophet's mosque, writing about mosques in general, okay, making website about the Prophet's seerah. Okay. So these things are covered under, and it forms part of our learning. And not just that, what we have is within our classrooms, we have different tables named after different empires, so Islamic empires. So what happens is they are learning about different empires indirectly. And then we have trips. So usually when we have a holiday, during half term or even the summer, we have different trips that go on. And in those trips, we again look at those empires that they have heard about on their tables, but don't know much about. So when we went to the British Museum, we focused on the Mamluks. We went to Victoria and Albert Museum, focused on the Mughals. Okay? So this is what we do, just to give them that idea and that identity as well. Yeah. So some of the things that we will be doing, like we did a shoebox for Syria. This is another madrasa where I was at just before. So this was all by students. They did this, they gathered, they spread the message. So it's not just the classroom. So if they're going to learn about zakat, they're going to go all the way. Okay? Holistically, they're going to try and give practically as well. Okay, we also took some of our students to old people's home to help out, to do some khidmah. So what we believe, and we're going to be doing more of this more locally around here now, because we moved to this building a few months ago. So the whole concept is, if we're going to teach them the hadith of Prophet ﷺ about taking care of the elders, it's no good just being on the sheets of paper. It's no good just inside the books. Until we take them out into the environment and teach them there, only then they'll understand what it's about. Yes. Yeah, that's another care home. There's 2 care homes. Some pictures of the trips that we went on. So when they go on trips, it's not just looking at things. They do have their activities, the things that they focus on, and they come back and they do present them as well. When it comes to teachers training, we do different kinds of trainings. We actually go to Safar Academy. We train their teachers as well sometimes. We've done that just recently. And our teachers are regularly trained. So every week we have a mini inset. We also have training that took place here a few months ago, where we invited teachers from around different mosques in the area. Some came from as far as Huddersfield and Bury. Yeah. Okay, just one last thing before we wrap this up. What we're trying to do now, what we just done in the past 7 months, is just the academy bit of Fatimah Elizabeth Cates. Okay? What we're looking into do is to go into other things. So for example, have a nursery. So we're looking into a premises as well. So if we do find a premises, this will just be an extra thing on the weekend. So as part of that, we're going to have a nursery, specialist research department, where we're going to look at things that are relevant and needed for our children here and the Muslims in Britain, for instance. And I'll give you an example of our research that we're doing right now on Fatimah Elizabeth herself. Have a specialist library, book clubs. That's something that we really, really want to start. Book clubs for different ages, different levels, consultancy for different people, adult courses, Quran cafe, where we'll have a small cafe. We'll discuss the Quran in English. Training of different sorts, which we've already been doing, debate society, media, press. So for example, with press, we're at the moment writing a book on Fatimah Elizabeth herself. So we're doing research at the moment on that. We're going to do lots of educational tours, not just in London, but also abroad. And lastly, different kinds of sports clubs. And that's just the beginning of it. So this is something that we're going into in the future. So it's not just the madrasa. We're hoping to go more. And your children can always be a part of this as well. Yeah, so lastly, this question that people ask us, who is Fatimah Elizabeth Cates and why do you take from her? And why the name? And why we're inspired by her? So we believe it's an inquisitive and thinking mind, her passionate, focused and meaningful study of the Quran prior to accepting Islam. And I'll explain how she became a Muslim. And a continuous struggle in life after accepting Islam. She was pelted by stones, eggs were thrown at her, garbage was thrown at her. She was pelted, abused throughout her life, horse manure taken from the road, wiped on her. And this is just the beginning. This is just where the researchers have just researched till now. What we kind of looked at about 2 weeks ago, we found, as we were looking through the archives, was a divorce petition, which belonged to Fatimah Elizabeth. And this is something that some of the researchers haven't looked at. And in that she spoke about how her husband used to treat her and why she was asking for divorce. And there were like 12 points where her husband tried to stab her. She was locked up. She was hit by tongs that they used to use in Victorian Britain. They're really, really heavy. They weigh about 2 pounds, which they used to use coal. She was hit across the head with that. Her ears began to bleed just because she was a Muslim. Initially, her husband was not a Muslim, but I'm thinking at the moment, at some point they remarried because they had the child later on. But Fatimah Elizabeth was the first known female Muslim in Victorian Britain. And it all started when she was actually part of a temperance movement. So she hated alcohol and she abhorred alcohol. And when she found out from a lecture of Abdullah Quilliam that Muslims also refrain from alcohol, so she wanted to find out more, and she got a copy of the Quran. So going back to why we study the Quran in English and help our children to understand it, going back to Fatimah Elizabeth, she got this copy of the Quran, took it home, and her mum said, "Look, what is that? Take it out of the house." And she ran after her, she ran into her bedroom, locked it up, and she began to read the Quran from the beginning till the end, and then she walked out. She even writes in some places she could not leave the Quran in her house, because if she left the Quran in her house, it would have been destroyed. So she used to go anywhere, even to the marketplace, to the shops. She used to keep her Quran in her hand, the one that was gifted to her by Abdullah Quilliam. And so basically, and it was only after she read the whole Quran that she accepted Islam. So we can look at the English translation, understand the context. We don't always have to know the meaning. Some students might want to understand the meaning, but we're trying to go for the middle ground, which everyone can do. Those who don't want to learn Arabic, they can also understand the Quran by doing this. And those who do want to learn Arabic, they can always learn Arabic as well. Yeah. Okay, just talking about the logo a bit. Fatimah Elizabeth, she was 19 when she accepted Islam, and she passed away when she was 32 because of pneumonia. Okay. They thought she would get better, but she didn't. She passed away. She was the first Muslim to be buried in Anfield, in Liverpool. And when she was passing away, there's also in a newspaper in Manchester that came out the following day, mentioned that when she was passing away, she lifted her finger towards the sky and said the Shahada. And she looked at Quilliam and said, "It is all over." So in that passage of time in her life, she went through a lot of struggle, and she kept the Quran with her all the time. And that's why we're looking at how we can make the Quran relevant for our students. So that's where our logo comes from. We might be rebranding soon. Just one last thing. Coming back to, this is a passage from her own conversion story, and inshallah I'll finish here. Her own conversion story, going back to how she engaged with the Quran. There's a saying by Iqbal, that it's an Urdu saying, but I'll just tell you what it means. That until the Quran is not revealed on you, onto your heart, it doesn't matter which tafsir or interpretation or exegesis you look at, you will not understand the understanding of the Quran from its fullest, and it's in its entirety, in its deeper meaning. So it's all about looking at the Quran as if it's being revealed upon us, as if it's being revealed for us. Okay? And I think this is what Fatimah Elizabeth went for. Okay. Anyone have any questions? Yeah, sorry about the timing, but any questions? Yeah.
During school holidays,
yeah.
It'll always be on the Sundays.
Yeah. So if you want your children to come on Sunday only, then it's just going to be Sundays. If you want your children to come on Saturdays only, then it's only Saturday. But during school, if it's a half-term holiday, that weekend, for instance, the first weekend, there will be no madrasa. So if parents do want to take their children on a holiday, you can do so. So even if it's on a Sunday, we'll still have the holidays. It's just that from this past few months' experience, we saw that we need to keep the holidays because a lot of students, they're not present on those days. So, but we will have trips instead of those. And they're going to be educational trips, some of them fun. So for instance, when we taught halal and haram, we looked at what was halal, healthy, and ethical. So we looked at what halal meant. So the teacher brought in different packets to show what was halal and then we looked at what was healthy. Okay, so they kind of had a Venn diagram between halal and healthy. And finally we had a third section to the Venn diagram of ethical. Okay. Something might be halal, it might be healthy as well, but is it ethical? So we make students think like that, and then we're going to do this again this year, but then we're going to plan a trip to one of the local farms as well to see what organic is and things like that. So that will all be in the holidays, so trips like that. Any questions? Yes?
I'm just wondering how you actually, differentiate. For example, you showed your timetable, and it starts off with 38 classes. And there are some children, for example, Anna, my son, who's already actually reciting with the group. So how would you actually...
Yeah. So if you're saying if he's already done tajweed, so what we would do is we'll have a test or just assess him. If he knows all the rules, that's fine. What we'll do is he'll go on to the Quran from the beginning. Not because, if he's just say he's on just 15, the reason why we would want him to start from the beginning is so he could do the English and the summary of the English as well. So when they read to the teacher, they don't just read the Arabic. They would read the Arabic, but if it's 4 pages, for instance, for the whole week, he'll also have to give a summary of those 4 pages. So just because of that. But if you want, you can always differentiate. If you want him to carry on, just say if he's in chapter 15, you want him to do a bit from there and a bit from the front, that's fine as well. If they've completed the Quran, then we'll just start from the beginning. Then we'll focus more on the English and the summary of it. And it all goes back to yourself. I mean, we'll have a chat as well. We'll ask you, how you want to go about it. So we're welcome to your opinions as well and what you think. But we'll assess them initially, inshallah. Yeah.
So what happens with children that come Saturday only, and the children that come Saturday and Sunday? What will the kids that don't come on Sunday or don't come on Saturday, what will they be missing out?
Yeah, so they won't be missing out much. So basically what would happen is, those students who are having a lesson, the topic will be the same on that very week. Okay, so if they're talking about zakat, they would do a lesson on that. Okay, the activities will be different, and there'll be set homework. And that homework will ultimately be what the kids will be doing on Sunday, for instance. Now, if those same kids come on Sunday, they can finish their homework, and they'll spend a bit more time on tajweed. That's how it kind of works. So because we have 3 teachers in the classroom, we're able to do that. We're able to differentiate between what students are doing what. And with the bigger children, the elder children, they have 2 teachers. Sometimes a 3rd teacher comes in for the training. Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
What about in terms of your planning? The
Yeah.
teachers plan?
Yes, the teachers have to. The teachers basically plan, and 2 days, so about 48 hours before, 2 days before, they send the lesson plans to myself, and then we put it on we have a group on Telegram, and they put that on there just so that the other teaching assist that as well. So they basically have to have the lesson plan 2 days before the actual lesson. So if we want to change it, make it more creative, more exciting, we can do that as well. So lessons are planned, they're written out, and they're sent to all of us as well.
And then how does that work in terms of, the earlier question that some children come on a Saturday, or both days, or one day?
Mhm.
And how
So,
does
yeah.
that planning work?
Yeah, so basically, teacher who is planning on Saturday and Sunday, they would plan one lesson for the Saturday students. So they would have a list of all the students who are coming on Saturday. They will be differentiated. And then to have students who are coming on Sunday, they'll be differentiated. And then according to that, they'll teach both lessons. Yeah. Activities will be slightly different. And like I said, if those students who are coming again on Sunday, their focus will be more on Quran and also the independent Quran learning as well. Yeah, so that's. And the reason why we're able to do that is because we don't have one of those quiet classrooms where everyone's just writing, because it is a bit chaotic, but there's a lot of learning going on. So as a result of that, teachers do walk around, go about. So that's why we have about 2 to 3 teachers in one classroom all the time. Yeah. So 2 is like the bare minimum. And class sizes, maximum we have up to like 24. If we have 3 teachers in the class, we'll have up to 26.
And what about in terms of, you talked about research, children working independently, carrying out research, do they have to go to their own devices, do you provide?
So,
in terms of iPads or whatever?
yeah, so when it comes to, for example, developing websites and things like that, we would show them how to do it in class. And then that would be part of a project. And then they would go home and they would complete the project at home.
So then will they have access to computers?
At the moment we don't have access to computers, but we do have our own iPads. So usually if they're doing something for the media, so they're making a little film, which they'll be doing soon. So we'll have things like that here for them. they'll have iPads. We've got those few gadgets here and there. But when they're working on a project, for instance, from home, then we'll expect them to do things at home as well. Yeah. Any more questions?
Do you have any special needs children?
Yes, we do. We have quite a few. Interestingly, we've got about 5, 6 special needs. So what happens is, this is very, very important. We ask their parents. So if there's severe needs, right, we would ask their parents to get their individual learning plan or their assessments from school. So then we can use them. So instead of us coming up with our own activities, we can use them. So there's like a continuity from school and mosque as well. So the way they're teaching at school will continue that here as well, but we'll just apply it to Islamic studies, Tajweed and Qaida.
My children have a hearing impairment.
Sure.
I don't know, would you have anyone signing any kind of signing?
Well, in that-
Teachers.
If you speak to us, what we can do is we can look for a teacher or someone who is or is learning it or doing something. We can try that as well. We can definitely look into that. Yeah.
That would be a barrier for my child.
Sure.
Communication level.
Sure. No. I mean, what we'll do, we will have a
Understanding that
yeah.
she's going
Yeah.
to learn anything.
Sure. No, of course. We'll discuss that and we'll see if we can bring someone in just for that purpose, inshallah. It's not a problem. Yeah. But and the most important thing is if you communicate with us what you need, we will provide, inshallah. We'll do what we can. Any other?
Sorry,
Sorry.
It's a broad thing, but it's very hard. I've had a struggle to look for somebody to teach me.
Yeah.
Everybody's very accepting, but when it comes down to that fact that she has a hearing impairment, they refuse.
No, inshallah. With us, we're learning as we're going along as well. We do, something I didn't mention before, we do have qualified teachers with us. Okay, so we have 2 qualified teachers here all the time. Other teachers, they've studied Islam at madrasas or they've done degrees at universities. So the qualified teachers that we have, we will get them involved and then see where we can go further with that as well. Inshallah. We're definitely, we're not going to say no to anyone for whatever reason, inshallah. We'll try our best and see how we can cooperate with yourself. And also if we can get like an individual learning plan from school, that'd be very helpful. Yeah, inshallah. Yes?
If we enroll today, when?
Yes, very important. 2 things. When are we going to start and the timing? Because we're still getting the classes together, so we're going to start the first week of October. So there's just 3 weeks left. That will give us enough time to order all the Islamic studies books, everything that we need, put everyone according to their groups and their levels, and we'll be able to do that. And if more people come in, we'll have extra class. Our madrasa classes will be from 9:15 in the morning to 1:15. Okay, so 9:15 to 1:15, that's 4 hours. So they have 3 sessions. In between sessions, they would have 1 5-minute break and 1 20-minute break where they'll go outside, play football, table tennis, basketball, everything outside. And you're asked to send them with the snacks as well. So just 1 packed lunch, which they'll have during their break. So that's that as well. And inshallah, the week before, you'll get text messages to remind you as well of a few things that you need to bring.
And just like in schools, if for any reason the classes can't go ahead on the Sunday or Saturday, or if our child cannot attend because they're not well, etc. Same sort of.
Yeah. What usually happens, even when it comes to fees, for instance, we always send a reminder a day before or 2 days before, just to remind you that fees deadline's coming up. Or if there's holidays, we send a text just to remind you again as well. Even though we'll give you a newsletter before, but just to remind you in case your child wasn't here that week, just so that you don't come all the way here and find it locked. So we will send a text just to give you a quick reminder that there's no school.
Also, parents evening, will there be some kind of interaction?
Yes, definitely.
Teachers and the
Yep.
parents?
What usually happens normally is there is a lot of interaction that goes on a weekly basis. But then we will have a parents' evening. We will look at some kind of progress going on. We won't look at it in a technical fashion the way that's supposed to, because we don't agree with that. But we will have parents' evening, he said. So we're looking at January. We didn't have one last year because we just started. But we're looking at January, so that'll be about 3 months. End of January, 3 to 4 months. Any more questions? You have a question? Yeah.
What do you have to wear?
Oh, you can wear whatever you like. There's no uniform. There's no uniform. Is that good? Okay. Okay, any other questions? So there is no uniform. We want students to wear what they're comfortable in, and we don't force them to wear, what we want them to wear. So if they decide to wear clothing which they feel is Islamic, then we will push them towards that, but there's no uniform in that sense. Any questions? Yes. Yes, yeah, it's all open door. You can come in. A lot of time, quite a few parents have come already to the classroom, so we don't really prepare for it. You can just walk in any time. You can have a look. If you want to sit with your child, you're more than welcome. It'll be good if you want to help out as well. You're more than welcome to do that.